The 2020 Judicial Candidates Forums are made possible by a partnership between UNC-TV and the North Carolina Bar Association. Incumbent Chris Brook and Jefferson Griffin are vying for seat 13 on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. They join me now to discuss their vision and their philosophy. Gentlemen, thank you so much. By coin flip, you get the first question. Real barn burner. Tell voters about yourself. Who is Chris Brook?
Well, I am a North Carolinian. I grew up in Raleigh. I went to public middle school and high school in Raleigh. My mom was a public school teacher for 3 decades in North Carolina. And I'm a double Tar Heel, so go Heels. I went to UNC for undergrad and for law school. And I've only ever been a North Carolina attorney before being appointed to the bench. I worked in both a private firm setting and public interest law before being appointed to the bench, and in those spaces accrued experience across subject matter areas, everything from employment law to property law to constitutional law. And I got to work throughout our state trial and appellate court system and our federal trial and appellate court system, including being able to lead successful litigation before the Supreme Court of the United States. Also taught at UNC Chapel Hill Law in their research, reasoning, and writing program, which is obviously very pertinent to the work that we do on the Court of Appeals. And you know, I also volunteer before I got on the bench, providing legal services. Folks like the Compass Center, which sort of did a phone and attorney thing for many years, providing advice to women in need in regards to family law issues, domestic violence issues. Started my own housing law clinic with a colleague of mine who I graduated from law school with at El Centro Hispano in Durham. So I had the opportunity not to only work throughout our court system, but also work with North Carolinians from all walks of life. And that has prepared me exceptionally well to serve on the Court of Appeals. Governor Cooper appointed me in April of 2019, so I've been on the bench for a year plus, pushing a year and a half. At this point, I've written 78 opinions as we're taping this. And those touch on everything from criminal law to family law to workers' compensation law. And I think you look at those opinions and you can see the experience that I've accrued, but also my respect for every North Carolinian who appears in front of us at the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
Jefferson Griffin, you have your eye on seat 13 as well. Tell us about yourself.
Kelly, thank you. I want to thank the Bar Association also for helping put this on and help get some information about our judicial candidate. So yeah, I grew up in Red Oak, North Carolina, which is Nash County. Went to public schools there. My mother was a school teacher of 37 years, and my father in a small business there. I ended up going to the University of North Carolina for undergrad and then North Carolina Central for law school. After that, I started practicing in the eastern part of the state, out of Kinston. Had a diverse practice there, mostly did criminal defense and civil defense work, and traveled all over the eastern part of the state. Colin Willoughby hired me in 2010 in the Wake County District Attorney's Office. So I joined that office with great mentors there. Prosecuted everything from infractions to homicides in that office. Was appointed to the bench in 2015 and elected by the people of Wake County to my current seat as a Wake County District Court judge in 2016. We were talking earlier, I also serve in the North Carolina Army National Guard as a captain. This past year, I consider it a privilege. It was also a tough year. We were deployed along with a lot of other North Carolinians and their families. We went to the Middle East on a deployment with the 30th Armored Brigade Combat Team where we did operations all over CENTCOM in the Middle East. And I got to serve in the countries of Kuwait, Iraq, and Jordan. I was a national security law attorney, so in that role, a lot of people don't really understand kind of what we do there, especially on the judge advocate side. So I'm doing orders production, orders review, rules of engagement training, law of war issues that come up. I advise the commanders on that and train soldiers in those issues and work with the operations department in that way too. So we've had a busy year. Glad to be back home, and that's a little bit about me.
All that experience you've outlined, and I'm going to ask you both you gentlemen this question, but in your case, that experience, how does it manifest itself in your decision-making on the bench? How do you see it affecting your work and how you think about approaching the Court of Appeals if you're elected?
Right, so let's look at the caseload for the Court of Appeals. It's probably 50% criminal law, 25% maybe family law, domestic, some juvenile, and then you've got 25% regulatory, constitutional issues, workers' comp, that kind of thing. what better background to have than that of somebody who's been a criminal defense lawyer, who knows the power of the state from that side, somebody who's been a prosecutor, who has worked in the busiest courthouse in the state. Probably we resolve the most cases out of anybody in the state in the Wake County DA's office. I served as a DWI prosecutor, a domestic violence prosecutor, and in the general felony rotation, anything from kidnapping to homicides. So that's 50% of the caseload of the Court of Appeals right there that I've been doing for 10 years. And that's not even counting the time on the district court bench where I've been presiding over criminal cases, civil cases. I'm in the domestic violence rotation. I handle domestic violence protective orders regularly, domestic violence criminal court, first appearances, general criminal court as well. So all those experiences go into that. And with the military service, there's a legal assistance side to it where I get to actually help soldiers with family law issues and stuff like that. But also the operational side. I think that'll translate very well to the Court of Appeals and the work that's done there. If you've been in the military or not, you know that we get to the point and we're straight about it. And I kind of equate that too. When I put on a robe, I have no agenda. I'm looking at the law, applying the facts. Same thing when I put on the camouflage uniform or the green suit, we call it. Same thing. I have no agenda. I'm there to do my job.
Mr. Brook, your perspective, a lot of experience working for people in communities. Same question. Has it met your expectation on Court of Appeals? Have you grown in that role? How does it affect your thinking now?
Well, you should be growing every day that you're on the bench, because we're always learning something new. We're always confronting a new fact pattern. We're always confronting a new corner of the law at the North Carolina Court of Appeals. So one of the things that's most important to me is to always be open to learning more, but also always be approaching it not with an end result in mind, but mastering the facts, mastering the law, and following the facts and the law where they lead. And the experience that I accrued before being appointed to the bench by Governor Cooper really put me in a wonderful position to be able to do that and get a running start at our Court of Appeals. I mentioned practicing in everything from employment law to property law, to constitutional law. And listen, there are not a lot of folks with constitutional law backgrounds on our court. That's a real value add that I bring to the court. But I also practiced throughout the court, our state and federal appellate court system, at the Court of Appeals, at the North Carolina Supreme Court, and arguing cases at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals and successfully leading litigation at the Supreme Court of the United States. That sort of appellate experience, that sort of appellate procedure experience is not something that's easy to pick up, and it's something that has really served me well in the year plus that I've been on the court. And I'm the candidate for this seat that has that appellate judicial experience and appellate legal experience. And it's meant that, listen, serving on the Court of Appeals is drinking from the fire hydrant on a day in, day out basis. But it's made the learning curve a lot more manageable for me in the time that I've served on the court.
We have just under 3 minutes left. I do want to ask you about party affiliation, because there's a Democrat and a Republican, and people see judges as being impartial. I see the conflict there mentally a little bit. If a Democratic voter looks at you, even a Republican, looks at you and sees that D, should they know exactly what they're getting based on that affiliation? And how should voters approach a partisan judicial race?
I mean, the answer to that question is absolutely not. I am a proud Democrat. I registered to vote when I was 18 years old here in North Carolina and registered as a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my entire life here in North Carolina. I also, when I walk up the steps of the North Carolina Court of Appeals, I'm not trying to be the best Democratic judge that I can possibly be. I'm trying to be the best judge that I can possibly be. And that doesn't mean trying to figure out what a Democratic or a progressive or a liberal outcome is. It means treating everybody that appears in front of us with respect. It means mastering the facts, mastering the record, understanding the law that is in front of us, and going where the facts and the law lead, ruling without fear or favor. I would be mortified if a Republican felt like they couldn't get a fair shake from me at the North Carolina Court of Appeals just because I happen to be a Democrat. That's not how I approach my job. What I would ask people to do is look at, our experience, compare our experience, look at the work that I've done at the North Carolina Court of Appeals. That work doesn't speak to a partisan agenda. That work speaks to a judge who takes every North Carolinian's case unbelievably seriously and rules based on the facts, based on the law, not some sort of agenda.
Same question to you, conservatives, Republicans, they pay attention to judicial appointments a lot. But in the case of the Court of Appeals, how do you assess that when voters go into that booth and Democrats look at you? What should they see? What should they expect?
Well, they'll see and what they expect, and what they'll get is what I've done for the last 5 years on the bench. And to show kind of how we've done that and express that, you look at the folks who are supporting us. We've got former Chief Justice Burley Mitchell supporting our campaign. We've been endorsed by the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, which is the plaintiff's bar. Usually represents a lot of the plaintiff's bar interest. We've got the North Carolina Association of Defense Attorneys, which represents a lot of the civil defense bar. They both endorsed our campaign. As far as the partisan side of it, when I put on a robe, just like when I put on that uniform for the Army, it doesn't matter. I'm committed to the rule of law. I put my hand on that Constitution and swore an oath to protect and defend it. So is it a part of who we are? Right, Chris said he's a lifelong Democrat. I registered as a Republican when I could. I was a big fan of Ronald Reagan. And it's part of who we are. But I can speak for myself and say that it has no bearing, no effect on how I look at a case and how I'm going to rule.
This is Chris Brook, Jefferson Griffin, seat 13 on your ballot, North Carolina Court of Appeals. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to WUNC. It's always hard to get the word out there about these races, but really appreciate the opportunity.
I do appreciate you coming on. I want to thank our partner, the North Carolina Bar Association.